So this is the game Sorry built in Excel. As you can see right here, we have the board, and it's a rough approximation of the traditional board game. So I wrote a macro that uses the recalculate tool, which is actually right here under the formulas tab, or you can press F9. Regardless, I thought it would be nice to program a little clickable button, and that's how the game works. You click the button, and it tells you which of the cards you drew. So how Sorry works is you have to draw a 1 or a 2 to get out, or a Sorry, but that only works if there's already characters on the board. So if I was green, I would take my player piece from right here, and once I get out, I would start here. And then the next player would go, so the next player drew a -4 or a backwards 4, doesn't work, and then I drew a 2, awesome, so now I can get my second player out. The next player goes, still stuck in their start area, and finally I'm able to move 2 spaces up. So it works just like the game of Sorry. You can just use the cut and paste to kind of move your characters around. And technically, if you wanted to, you could kind of extend the functionality of this. And that's really what we're going to spend this video looking at, really how I created this. So this is really cosmetic stuff, and this is just using cell shading. So I downloaded a plugin in Chrome called Color Picker. So using that, I was able to go to Google and go to Google image search and just look up the Sorry board game. And I just picked one that I thought looked cool, and then I used the color picker to actually identify, this is the hex code, which isn't super useful for Excel, but then with the hex code I can plug that in right here and actually get the RBG values. So once you have those RBG values, you can easily, on the Home tab, under the fill, the cell fill option, go to more colors, and then under custom, fill in the RBG values. So that's kind of how I did the color coding. These characters within here, these are actually symbols. And I think I missed that one, so that should be green. But yeah, technically in Excel, in the Insert tab all the way to the right under Symbols, you have all the special characters that you can insert. So that's kind of how I tried to emulate the same design as the traditional board game. And just to kind of make it cool, I did down here come up with some alternative pieces. So if you wanted to not use the paragraph symbol and you wanted to use one of these, you could technically do that. Just be sure to color code the character to align with what color your team is. And obviously once you go around the board, you have to kind of follow it like a clock, and then when you get to your team, home base, you go in and you would just cut and paste your characters, and then when you get all 4 of your pawns in home, that's when you win. And what else did I do? So the macro, those are pretty tricky. You actually have to customize the quick access toolbar here at the top by going to more commands, and then on customize ribbon, you have to make sure you check off the developer box because that's hidden by default. And then how that works is you go to the developer tab and you can insert a form control, specifically a button. And when you insert the button, it's going to prompt you to draw it and give it a name. So I'll give that the default name, click record, click OK, and you'll notice it's immediately recording. And by recording, it means any action I do on the keyboard is going to be included on the macro when the macro is triggered. So I really just want to do the, I believe it was, what was it? Let's go to data. No, it was under formulas and then calculate now. So click that and then go back to my macro and click stop recording. So that's really how that macro works. And the thing about macros is you have to change the default file type. So by default, it's just this Excel workbook, but this has to be changed to a macro enabled workbook for this to work properly. So that's how that macro works. And then to customize the text, you have to right click on it and go to edit text, and you can change up the verbiage if you'd want. But that's pretty much it. So then once it's a button, it's just a clickable button. So now I can click here and that's going to trigger that recalculate feature. But I'm going to get rid of that just to declutter the screen. And a lot of this is just text, so I kind of left some of the inner workings on the screen just to kind of give you more information. For example, we have the rules for how to play if you're not familiar. It's similar to Parcheesi, the board game, but there's some specialties like bumping and sliding. For instance, you can slide, like if a red character landed on this green arrow, then their character would slide all the way to right here, to where that circle is. Anyhow, so the other tricky thing, and probably the last thing we're going to go over, is how does this work? So this works in some convoluted ways. Let's go to the Formula tab and trace the precedence, and I think that'll help a little bit. So the first thing that we're going to do is what's going on in this cell. So this cell is actually generated from this cell. So now that we know that, let's go examine what's going on in this cell. And this one is tricky, in my opinion. This is called a VLOOKUP, and it's definitely easier than writing. So we have in Sorry, we have 11 different card types, and I could have written some really long if statements, nested if statements, and that would have been a pain in the butt, simply put. I didn't want to do that. It's not very scalable. It's super prone to typos. So instead I did this VLOOKUP. And how this VLOOKUP works is, first thing is it's going to look for, as you can see, the lookup value. So the lookup value is right here in the cell directly above. And how does this cell above it work? Well, that's a random number generator. So it's going to generate a number between 1 and 11. So that's why I have in this first column for the card table map, the card number itself, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it skips 6, it goes to 7, has 8, skips 9, and then 11 and 12, and then sorry. So then I mapped each of those sorry cards to a numeric value. So that's why it's only going to 11, and then in this random number generator, it's going from 1 as the first argument, because that's how it works. You can see the bottom number is the lowest number it can be, and then the top number is the highest number it can be. And then finally in the VLOOKUP, this is the tricky part. So first it starts off with the lookup value, so that we saw that is right here. So it's a number between 1 and 11 dynamically generated each time the worksheet is recalculated. The second part is the table array. So as you can see, that's this highlighted in red. It's these cells from where it says card ID down here to the bottom right corner with this text. And after that, it's going to say, okay, so from that array, or think of it as a small data table, which column do you want me to pull the data from when I output the value here in the cell? So that's why I said 2. Otherwise, if I kept it as 1, it would just generate the value, and that's not really what I wanted. And then I would just type in the keyword false, and that's going to give me the option to do an exact string match, or in this case, an exact value, numeric value match. So it's definitely complicated, but in this regard, it's actually super scalable. If you wanted to make your own cards, you could. So you could, come up with a new card, maybe a super sorry, and maybe that will have the ability to bump someone out of their home base even though they're safe and return them to their start area if you draw that super sorry card. So I would definitely, in addition to just writing out the rule and the new card ID value, I would have to program it into my formulas, but it's not too bad because all I'd have to do is right here in my random number generator is change 11 to 12. And then it'll start to generate that. Eventually it should generate it here. So yeah, that is it. And this was just very, for one, educational. I think Sorry is an awesome game. I used to play it with my grandmother. But two, it's just interesting seeing that Excel is more than just manipulating data. You can use it to create, in this case, games, like your own board games, and you're not investing any type of physical mediums to create it. You're just using the electronic spreadsheet, a couple of formulas, and a couple hours of time to design it. So really, your imagination is the limit. So I hope this inspires you, and as always, please go to thedatadreamer.com and you can download a copy of this. I didn't create the web page yet, but you can just search the keyword sorry, and I'm going to have a web page where you can download this Excel file. Remember, it's a macro file. It doesn't change anything for you. I just want to point that out, that if you change it back to a regular Excel workbook, then you're not going to be able to take advantage of this clickable macro button. You'll have to go to formulas and calculate now for the random number generation to work. But that is it. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them on this video. Feel free to give us a like if you like what you saw here. And feel free to comment on the datadreamer.com webpage. Thanks so much for viewing.